Joining us now with some analysis is UTEP professor Dr. Richard Pineda. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Pineda. Thank you. Mueller finding no criminal conspiracy with Russia. Would you call this a victory for President Trump today?
Well, I think the thing that's very telling is that by midday, if you looked at liberal media, the sense was there were plenty of smoking guns still to be unearthed. If you look at conservative media, the sense was, in fact, the president was totally free of blame. I think the one thing that's really important to remember about the report is that while it doesn't exonerate the president, there are a number of questions that I think that the Democrats will try to push on in the next several weeks. And I think that that's really where we're at. I think this is a question of optics at this point and figuring out if the political parties can maneuver around this idea. It's also important to remember that at this point there are still active cases in the southern and eastern districts of New York, as well as the state court in New York. So I think that there's still quite a bit out of the report that will eventually come to light.
All right, and Democrats, they're officially calling for Mueller to testify, and they also want to get that full report. They don't want any redactions. Will any of this really change anything?
I think that that's a tough question to ask at this particular moment. I think that the Democrats have to make a decision if they're willing to push for impeachment of the president. They know that they probably have enough votes in the House to be able to bring the charges forward. They also know that if the Senate stands the way that it does, that the Senate will not push to act on those charges. And so the question is, are they willing to risk the political capital to move forward on that? I think one thing that will be interesting, and certainly for local viewers that are following Congressman O'Rourke's campaign, is to see how Democratic candidates address the issue over the next couple of days in visits around the country.
All right, let's talk about the other side. Republicans are pretty much saying, you know, give it a rest, close this chapter. Do you think Democrats should move on, or do you think it's important for them to keep pushing?
Well, I think that it's always important for the political system to try to seek the closest thing to truth that we can find. And the challenge right now, and I think this is very clear from reading the redacted report, is that Special Counsel Mueller clearly points out that there are things that they could not act on to convict or to find an indictment, but was also very clear that because they don't have that proof does not mean that they could exonerate the president. And again, if you look at the status of where things have been with the number of indictments that have come out of the report as a result of the investigation, I do think that there's quite a bit that still needs to be looked at. And remember, all it takes is a quick scan of the document available on your website to look at how many pages are blacked out and redacted, which means that there's quite a bit of information that's still not available to the public. At a minimum, Congress needs to be able to see the entire report without those redactions. And I think that it's in the interest of both the Republicans and the Democrats to at least allow that to happen. If the Republicans are right, then that vindicates them, I think, through the election, through the beginning of the 2012 campaign. If they're wrong, those redactions and some of those issues, I think, are going to haunt the president going into 2012. The other thing to note is that at the end of the report, there's a number of active cases that Mueller identifies that are still ongoing, including something like 15 that have been totally redacted. That means that there are active criminal investigations, likely those investigations in the eastern and southern district of New York, which means that the president is not through the woods yet, despite the rhetoric and the tweets and the approach he's taken.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Pineda with UTEP. Thank you so much, as always, for your insight.
You're welcome.